There's a certain silence that exists in intimacy, not the absence of words, but the presence of attention. Too often, men enter that silence with a goal, rather than a curiosity. They focus on performance, on doing, on achieving, and in that chase, they forget the essence of what turns a moment of pleasure into an act of connection. Understanding female pleasure as a language of connection, not performance, requires a shift in perception from the idea of sex as an act of accomplishment to an experience of mutual exploration. Too many men approach intimacy as though it were an exam to pass, a series of moves to get right, a performance to impress. But in that mindset, the connection gets lost. The true essence of pleasure is not in the act of achieving orgasm or proving one's skill, it lies in the emotional and sensory communication that happens between two people who are attuned to each other. Pleasure, especially female pleasure, is not linear. It is cyclical, fluid, and deeply responsive to emotional safety and presence. When a man understands that, he begins to see that touch, eye contact, tone, and even breath are all forms of language. Each carries meaning, and together they form a conversation that transcends words. When a woman feels seen, not as a goal but as a person to connect with, her body opens in ways that technique alone can never achieve. It's not about doing it right, but about being present enough to sense what feels right in that moment. It's about recognizing that the clitoris is not a switch to turn on pleasure but a mirror that reflects how connected she feels. Every subtle response, a sigh, a shift in rhythm, a quiet moan, is her way of speaking to you. The question is, are you listening? Too often, men rush toward what they think is the destination, missing the richness of the journey. But when you learn to slow down, when you learn to listen with your hands, your lips, and your breath, you begin to understand that pleasure isn't just physical. It's emotional, psychological, even spiritual. Connection transforms stimulation into intimacy. It dissolves performance anxiety and replaces it with curiosity. Instead of trying to do something to her, you begin to be with her, to explore what unfolds naturally between you. The more you tune into her reactions, the more she trusts you to lead her deeper into pleasure. And trust is the gateway to vulnerability, to openness, to surrender. This is why understanding pleasure as connection is so vital. It shifts the focus from control to communication, from performance to presence. It teaches that real pleasure is not about giving her an orgasm to prove your worth, it's about creating a shared experience where both of you feel seen, heard, and deeply understood. The art of slowness is not about hesitation or restraint, it's about cultivating awareness in every moment of touch. In a world driven by instant gratification, slowness has become almost revolutionary. Yet within intimacy, slowness is the very thing that transforms physical contact into emotional depth. The human body, especially the female body, blooms under patience. When you move slowly, when you allow time for tension and anticipation to build, you create a space where every sensation becomes amplified. What many men fail to realize is that arousal is not an on-air-off switch, it's a gradual awakening. The clitoris, for instance, contains over 8,000 nerve endings, but its sensitivity depends on readiness, both physical and emotional. Rushing through touch or stimulation can overwhelm rather than excite. But slowness, deliberate and attentive, allows desire to breathe, to unfold naturally, to move from curiosity to craving. Slowness teaches you to feel, not just to act. It draws you into presence, that rare quality of being fully immersed in what is happening right now. It's the way your hand lingers before it moves, the way your lips hover before they touch, the way silence fills the space before a breath turns into a moan. Every pause becomes a moment of invitation. Every movement becomes communication. When you slow down, you give her body the time to respond, to guide you, to trust you. You begin to understand that pleasure is not about intensity but about layering, each moment building upon the previous one, each touch awakening new dimensions of sensation. In slowness, anticipation becomes the pulse of desire. The waiting, the teasing, the almost touch, these moments ignite the mind as much as the body. They create emotional electricity, a kind of longing that deepens the connection before the climax ever arrives. Many men underestimate the power of this space between action and release. Yet this is where intimacy truly lives. It's not in the final act but in the journey, the gradual unfolding that makes every sensation meaningful. The art of slowness requires confidence because it resists the pressure to rush toward an end. It's about trusting that you don't need to prove pleasure, you need to create it, moment by moment. It asks you to stay curious, to explore with patience, to breathe with her rhythm. Because in that stillness, in that careful pace, pleasure turns into something far greater than stimulation. It becomes connection, awareness, and the quiet recognition that true arousal is born not from speed, but from presence. The importance of presence in intimacy cannot be overstated. Presence is what separates an act of touch from an experience of connection. It is the energy that says, "I'm here with you, not just doing something to you." So many men enter intimacy distracted by their thoughts, by self-consciousness, by a desire to impress or to reach a particular outcome. But when your mind is elsewhere, your body follows, and she feels it. Women are exquisitely sensitive to the quality of attention they receive. They can sense when a man is performing rather than engaging, when he is focused on what he's doing instead of who he's with. Presence is not about doing more, it's about being more attuned, more aware, more grounded in the shared moment. When you are truly present, every gesture becomes meaningful. You begin to notice the small details, the rhythm of her breathing, the way her body shifts in response, the subtle tension in her muscles when anticipation builds. You are not thinking about what comes next, you are responding to what is happening now. This kind of awareness creates trust because she feels seen, felt, understood. It's not about mastering technique but mastering attention. The clitoris, with its sensitivity and complexity, responds not only to physical stimulation but also to emotional attunement. When your mind drifts, your touch loses its depth. But when your focus is anchored in her, in the cadence of her body's language, your touch becomes an extension of her desire. Presence demands vulnerability because it asks you to let go of control. It's not about following a plan, it's about surrendering to the flow of connection. In that surrender, you begin to read her without needing words. You sense when to slow down, when to linger, when to pull back just enough to make her want more. You move not with agenda but with intuition. This is the kind of connection that turns physical pleasure into emotional intimacy. It's the difference between touching her body and reaching her essence. True presence also means being comfortable with silence, with stillness, with the pauses that carry weight. It means allowing the moment to expand without rushing to fill it. When you meet her with undivided attention, you create a space where she feels safe to express herself, not just through words but through her body's natural response. And in that space, something powerful happens. Pleasure stops being a goal to chase and becomes an energy shared between two people fully awake in the same moment. The interplay between confidence and curiosity is what gives intimacy its magnetic charge. Confidence without curiosity can feel dominant, even disconnected. Curiosity without confidence can feel uncertain or hesitant. But when both coexist, they create a dynamic that is both grounded and alive. Confidence is the energy of safety. It tells her she can relax in your presence, that you know how to lead, how to hold the moment without rushing or faltering. Curiosity is the energy of exploration. It tells her you are open to discovering her, that you are not assuming what she wants but learning it in real time. Together, they form a rhythm where strength meets sensitivity, and certainty meets openness. Confidence in this context isn't about arrogance or control. It's not about believing you know everything, it's about knowing that you can handle whatever arises. It's the steadiness in your hands, the calmness in your breath, the willingness to stay when the moment deepens. Women respond to that kind of presence because it makes them feel secure enough to let go. But curiosity is what keeps that security alive. It prevents confidence from becoming rigidity. It invites her body and mind to reveal themselves, layer by layer. Curiosity asks, what happens if I touch her here? If I change the rhythm? If I wait a moment longer? It's a quiet form of attention that keeps desire alive because it resists repetition and routine. When a man combines confidence with curiosity, he transforms intimacy into a dialogue instead of a performance. His touch says, I know how to lead, but I'm listening. This balance allows her to surrender without fear, because she senses that he's not just taking control, he's co-creating the experience. The clitoris, in particular, responds beautifully to this dynamic because it requires both precision and adaptability. Every woman's response is different, and no two moments feel exactly the same. A confident man trusts his intuition enough to guide, but a curious man adapts, he reads her reactions, he listens for the subtle shifts that signal pleasure or overwhelm. This interplay also nurtures mutual growth. Confidence invites her into trust, curiosity invites her into play. Together, they create a safe yet exciting space where pleasure is discovered, not demanded. It becomes an evolving journey, not a rehearsed act. And as he moves with both assurance and wonder, she feels not just touched but explored, not just desired, but deeply understood in the most intimate way possible. Turning technique into communication is what transforms intimacy from a physical act into an emotional conversation. Many people think of technique as a set of methods or tricks, the right pressure, the right movement, the right rhythm. But real intimacy isn't built on memorized actions, it's built on responsiveness. Technique becomes meaningful only when it is guided by awareness and empathy. Every touch, every change in pace, every pause can communicate something: curiosity, tenderness, desire, reassurance. When you use technique as a language rather than a routine, you shift from doing something to your partner to creating something with them. That's when touch stops being mechanical and starts being expressive. The clitoris, in particular, responds to this kind of communicative energy. Its sensitivity means that subtlety matters more than strength, and attunement matters more than skill. When you focus on what you feel beneath your fingers, her breath, her movements, her energy, you begin to listen through touch. You realize that she is constantly speaking through her body, giving feedback that is more honest than words. Technique, then, is not a performance but a conversation. You offer something, and she responds, you adjust, and the dialogue deepens. In that exchange, trust grows. She feels that you're not trying to control her pleasure but to discover it with her. Communication through touch also requires emotional fluency. It's not enough to know where to touch, you must know how to be while touching. Your energy, your breath, your focus all communicate something. If you are tense or distracted, she will feel it. If you are present and connected, she will open. The body always tells the truth. This is why mastering technique means mastering awareness of yourself, of her, and of the subtle dance that happens between you. When you touch with intention, not urgency, every movement becomes part of a rhythm that builds anticipation and connection. Technique becomes art when it reflects understanding. It's when you can read her cues without her needing to explain them, when your touch becomes intuitive because you're not performing, you're conversing. You respond to her as she responds to you, creating a feedback loop of pleasure and trust. In that space, stimulation becomes communication, and communication becomes intimacy. What began as a physical act evolves into an emotional exchange, a wordless dialogue where both partners feel seen, heard, and profoundly connected through the language of touch.